I moved through the streets of Kiev like a ghost in a city, haunted not only by the sounds of war, but by the invisible hand of betrayal. Buildings scarred by artillery stood as silent witnesses to the human cost of greed. Windows were shattered, walls blackened, debris littered the streets, and in the midst of this devastation, I found young soldiers, their uniforms torn, their faces streaked with dirt and blood, yet their eyes burning with a determination no amount of corruption could extinguish. One soldier, barely 19, approached me. His hands trembled as he held a letter from his commanding officer, a piece of paper that outlined not only orders but, as he realized, the cold calculation of his expendability. He looked at me and whispered, "They sold us like cattle," and they smiled while doing it. I felt the weight of his words in my chest. Betrayal had a new name tonight, and it carried a price measured in blood, tears, and shattered dreams. The generals who orchestrated the conflict from warm offices far from the battlefield had turned courage into currency. Every maneuver, every charge, every assault was monetized. Lives became numbers. Families became collateral. And yet, despite the magnitude of the treachery, humanity persisted. I spoke with a medic who had treated dozens of soldiers in a single night. She recounted stories of comrades sent into battles with insufficient equipment, inadequate backup, and no plan for survival, all while officers calculated their bonuses in silence. Each life lost was another line in a spreadsheet, another coin in a vault. And still she worked tirelessly, moving through smoke and rubble, saving those she could, refusing to let greed define the worth of human life. Amid the despair, there was defiance. Soldiers whispered strategies in the shadows, improvising maneuvers that avoided the deadly traps set by their own leaders. Civilians delivered food, water, and medicine, risking sniper fire and shelling to support a front line abandoned by its command. Courage, it seemed, could not be sold. Humanity could not be stolen. Even in betrayal, people found ways to fight back. Not just the enemy, but the system that had devalued them. Heartbreak was everywhere. I witnessed a father cradling his son's lifeless body, refusing to leave the battlefield until his friend carried him away. I saw mothers scream at walls, cursing generals whose greed had taken their children, and yet within that heartbreak there were sparks of hope. Survivors held each other, whispered promises to continue, and found strength in the unspoken bond of shared suffering. The suspense of every moment was suffocating. Each step could bring another casualty. Each order could be a death sentence disguised as a strategy. Soldiers moved with calculated care, aware that betrayal lurked not just in the fog of war, but in the minds of those who were meant to guide them. Yet even in this uncertainty there was clarity. Courage is the choice to act despite fear. Resilience is the decision to endure despite betrayal. I met a young lieutenant, his face bruised and bloodied, who had survived an ambush orchestrated by officers who had ignored intelligence reports. He laughed bitterly, a hollow sound. "They count us like money. But we are not theirs to trade. We will fight, not for them, but for ourselves, for our families, for our honor." That moment captured the essence of this war. Life itself becomes a statement of defiance. Revenge is not only in defeating the enemy, but in surviving the betrayal of those meant to protect you. Each heartbeat, each step forward, is a triumph against the greed that sought to define your worth. The lessons were becoming clear. Warlike life is often governed by greed, deceit, and betrayal. But true strength comes from the refusal to let these forces determine your destiny. Courage can emerge from despair. Unity can emerge from chaos. Hope can survive even when the system that should sustain you has failed. As dawn approached, I saw the city shift. The soldiers and civilians, though exhausted, moved with renewed purpose. Abandoned supply lines were improvised. Vulnerable positions were reinforced. Lives that could have been sacrificed for profit were preserved through determination and ingenuity. The very greed that sought to exploit them had inadvertently forged a new kind of resilience, one that no money could buy. I stood on a rooftop, overlooking the battlefield, and reflected on the magnitude of what I witnessed. Generals may make millions, but they cannot purchase bravery. They cannot command loyalty when it is born of respect, not fear. They cannot assign courage, only witness it. And the human spirit, resilient, defiant, compassionate, remains the one force they cannot control. War teaches brutal lessons. The betrayal of those in power is almost inevitable. But heartbreak, suffering, and loss are not the end. Survival, courage, and moral resistance are victories in themselves. Every soldier who refuses to surrender, every civilian who aids another despite danger, every act of kindness and bravery is a rebuttal to greed, a rejection of dehumanization. Tonight the ledger of generals may glow with profit, but the streets of Kiev echo with stories that no amount of money can erase, of courage, of endurance, of humanity rising defiantly in the face of betrayal. The price of human life may be calculated in millions by those who sit in warm offices, but the true value of life is measured in the resilience, compassion, and unbreakable will of those who live it. And in this realization, a lesson for the world emerges. Wealth may exploit, greed may betray, but the human spirit is priceless. Courage cannot be bought, survival cannot be traded, hope cannot be sold, and in standing firm, in defying the odds, in fighting not for the profit of others but for life itself, we reclaim what is most sacred, our humanity. Night had fallen over Kiev, and with it, a silence that was both ominous and heavy with anticipation. The streets, scarred by war and filled with the remnants of greed, seemed almost to hold their breath. Every corner could conceal danger, not only from an enemy advancing with rifles and artillery, but from the corruption and betrayal that had already cost countless lives. Soldiers whispered rumors of generals counting profits in distant offices, while their comrades bled in the streets. Civilians murmured stories of young men sent to die unnecessarily, orders manipulated for money rather than strategy. Every shadow carried a secret, every whisper hinted at treachery. I moved among them, my notebook open, camera at my side, capturing not just events but the human soul in turmoil. One young soldier, barely 20, lowered his rifle and confided, "We have lost faith in our leaders. They sold us. Every one of us. But we haven't sold ourselves. Not yet." His words were a spark. In the darkness, hope flickered. Betrayal, no matter how deep, could not extinguish it. And so the night became a crucible, testing every human instinct, courage against fear, loyalty against despair, compassion against anger. The first turning came quietly. A squad that had been ambushed hours earlier emerged from the shadows, bruised and battered but alive. They had defied orders that would have sent them straight into death. Their improvisation, their courage and their refusal to be sacrificed for profit became the first ripple in a tide that would soon swell. Civilians, inspired by the soldiers' survival, began organizing supply routes that the corrupt command had abandoned. Food, medicine, and intelligence moved through hidden paths, guided by those who refused to be pawns in someone else's scheme. Suspense gripped every moment. Each movement of a soldier or civilian could provoke retaliation. Snipers still patrolled the rooftops. Mines littered the streets. And yet every act of bravery, every whispered plan chipped away at the advantage that greed and betrayal had initially granted the generals. The enemy outside was formidable, but the enemy within, the one who monetized death, was also being undermined from within by the courage of those they had betrayed. He witnessed moments of heartbreak that would stay with me forever. Faye mother, her clothes torn, clutching the photograph of a son already lost to a senseless assault, collapsed into the arms of a volunteer. Her grief was a torrent, raw and unfiltered. Yet even in her despair she spoke a vow. "They may have taken him, but they will not take our courage." That phrase became a refrain across the city that night. Every soldier who survived an ambush, every civilian who ran through smoke and rubble to aid another, repeated it silently, carrying the torch of resilience through the shadows of betrayal. Twists and shocks came relentlessly. A courier carrying crucial information was presumed dead after an attack, only to return with the very documents that would save a trapped unit. A soldier previously thought missing appeared unexpectedly at a checkpoint, bringing intelligence that changed the balance of a skirmish. And then there were betrayals that cut deeper than any bullet. Officers caught pocketing supplies, redirecting reinforcements, or deliberately leaving units exposed. These moments were almost unbearable to witness, yet they also forged a new clarity. Courage is not dependent on leadership. Resilience is born in adversity. The city's pulse quickened as the night progressed. Citizens began leaving hiding places, repairing barricades, lighting small fires for warmth and visibility. Soldiers reinforced positions, improvised defenses, and coordinated ambushes that neutralized what little advantage the enemy or corrupt generals retained. The turning was not sudden. It was methodical, born of desperation, ingenuity, and the refusal to succumb to despair. In the midst of this, I saw acts of revenge that were subtle yet profound. Soldiers refused to obey commands that would send comrades to needless death. Civilians sabotaged supplies meant to support corrupt officers. Volunteers spread information, exposing the crimes of those who had monetized their lives. These acts of quiet rebellion became louder than any gunshot. Every heartbeat of defiance was a rebuke to greed, a declaration that human life cannot be bought, sold, or discarded. I walked past a father who had been searching for his son all night. Exhausted, covered in soot, he finally found the boy, wounded but alive. Tears streamed down both their faces. The father's whisper to me captured the essence of the night. They thought we would break. They thought we would obey their greed, but we refused. We fight, we survive. That is our revenge. The suspense, heartbreak, and defiance built toward an almost cinematic climax. Units that had been isolated managed to coordinate attacks, driving back enemy positions. Civilians guided soldiers through safe paths, while ambushing the enemy at weak points. The night that began with betrayal, fear, and grief was slowly transforming into a testament to ingenuity, courage, and moral resistance. As dawn approached, the city shimmered with the first light of hope. Streets that had been silent and dangerous hummed with cautious activity. Soldiers, still battered, still grieving, moved with purpose. Civilians rebuilt supply lines, treated the wounded, and shared resources. The city was alive, not just surviving but reclaiming itself from the grip of corruption and greed. And through it all, I realized a vital lesson for the world. Betrayal may wound, heartbreak may scar, and greed may try to destroy, but resilience, courage, and moral integrity endure. Survival is a form of resistance. Compassion is a weapon stronger than any bullet. Courage is contagious, and even in the darkest night, humanity can rise to defy those who would trade life for money. Kyiv had refused to break. Every heartbeat, every act of defiance, every shared burden was a step toward reclaiming dignity, justice, and hope. The generals may have counted profits, but the people counted courage, and in that tally, they were infinitely richer. The loudspeakers that once proclaimed false orders now fell silent, but their absence was filled with a more potent sound, the whispers, shouts, and footsteps of those who refused to be victims. Life, determination, and moral courage echoed louder than greed, louder than betrayal, louder than any orchestrated death. As I walked through the streets at dawn, exhausted but awed, I understood that this night, this turning was not only about war, it was about life itself. Every challenge, every act of treachery, every heartbreak we endure can be transformed into lessons of courage and resilience. Even in betrayal there is a path forward. Even in loss there is purpose. And even when the odds seem insurmountable, the human spirit can prevail. By the time sunlight broke fully across the rooftops, Kyiv had been reborn in a small, defiant way. Every person who survived the night had rewritten the rules. Every act of courage had proven that greed cannot enslave the human heart. Every moment of compassion had reminded the world of what is priceless: life, hope, and the refusal to surrender to injustice. And so, the city moved forward, battered but unbroken, with a renewed understanding. Betrayal can wound, heartbreak can scar, but endurance, courage, and moral resistance define our legacy. The night had tested everything: loyalty, bravery, love. But the people of Kyiv had refused to break. They had fought the enemy and the greed within, and they had survived. The first rays of morning cut through the smoke-laden skies of Kyiv, illuminating streets still scarred by fire and betrayal, yet now brimming with life. I stood on a crumbling rooftop, notebook in hand, watching a city rise from the ashes of corruption and greed. The generals, those men who had counted lives like coins and sent cannon fodder to the slaughter for profit, were now exposed, not just in the ledger of history, but in the living, breathing defiance of the people they sought to exploit. I have witnessed countless acts of heroism in my decades of reporting. But nothing compares to the quiet triumph that emerges when humanity refuses to be dehumanized. Soldiers who survived ambushes, civilians who ran through rubble to aid the wounded, mothers and fathers who refused to surrender hope. These are the true victors. Their courage does not reside in medals or promotions. It resides in their hearts, unshakable, unyielding, and profoundly human. I walked among the survivors. I saw young men helping the elderly cross shattered streets, medics tending to wounds with hands still trembling from fatigue, and volunteers carrying supplies with a determination that no calculation of greed could suppress. Everywhere the scars of betrayal were visible, shattered walls, abandoned vehicles, and lives forever altered. But the spirit of Kiev was stronger than any ledger, more powerful than any profit-driven strategy. Everywhere I looked, I saw revenge, not the blind vengeance of hatred, but the moral and enduring revenge of survival. The soldiers and civilians had refused to be exploited. They had reclaimed their lives, their dignity, and their city. And in that reclamation, they delivered a lesson that no general, no corrupt officer, no tyrant could erase. Human courage and compassion cannot be bought, cannot be sold, and cannot be destroyed. I spoke to a young soldier, his uniform tattered, his hands scarred from relentless fighting. He smiled, though it was a smile carved from pain and endurance. They thought they could buy our lives. They thought fear would control us. But we chose to live. That is our revenge. That is our victory, and he was right. Life itself became the ultimate defiance. Every step forward, every act of bravery, every hand extended to help another was a resounding statement. Greed may plot, betrayal may strike, but the human spirit rises. The heartbreak of the past nights had been immense. Families torn apart, friends lost, soldiers sacrificed for profit. All these wounds were real and they were deep, but Kiev had transformed them into strength. Each act of endurance, each courageous decision, each whisper of hope became a thread in a tapestry of resilience. And as I observed, I realized this was more than a city fighting corruption and war. It was a living lesson for the world. The loudspeakers that once broadcasted orders to send soldiers to pointless death now echoed in memory as symbols of what had been overcome. The city had reclaimed its narrative. Kiev was no longer a stage for the exploitation of life. It was a testament to the triumph of moral courage, human resilience, and the refusal to surrender to greed. As the day progressed, I witnessed small miracles everywhere. Children ran through streets that had been battlegrounds, laughter punctuating the rubble. Soldiers helped clear debris, not for accolades, but because it was the right thing to do. Volunteers rebuilt makeshift shelters and distributed aid, refusing to let betrayal dictate the future. Every act, however small, was part of a chorus of defiance that silenced the greed of men who had tried to turn life into profit. And in that chorus, the lessons for life beyond war became undeniable. Betrayal will happen. People will exploit, deceive, and profit from your courage. But your spirit is yours alone. Protect it. Nurture it. Heartbreak will strike. Loved ones may be lost, and the cost of survival may feel unbearable. But resilience grows in those moments. Fear will try to dominate. Danger will lurk in every shadow. Yet courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to act despite it. True revenge is not destruction, but survival. Living fully, morally, and bravely is the ultimate triumph over greed and corruption. And finally, hope is more contagious than despair. Compassion is stronger than cruelty. Life is infinitely more valuable than any ledger or profit. Kiev's streets, once marked by betrayal, terror, and loss, now glimmered with possibility. The human spirit, tested by fire and greed, had emerged victorious. Soldiers, civilians, and volunteers had reclaimed not just a city, but a profound truth. Life, courage, and humanity cannot be quantified, sold, or destroyed. E. Wolf Blitzer have witnessed it all. The generals may count their millions. They may boast of their power, manipulate the weak and profit from the vulnerable. But in Kiev, they have met their true reckoning, the unbreakable will of ordinary men and women who refuse to be sacrificed. Their courage is eternal. Their defiance will outlive corruption, betrayal, and even war itself. As I leave the city at dawn, notebook closed, camera silent, I carry with me the story of Kiev. Not just a tale of greed and betrayal, but of hope, resilience, and moral victory. The lessons are clear. No system of exploitation can defeat a determined spirit. No act of corruption can diminish the worth of courage. And no betrayal, no heartbreak, no greed can extinguish the flame of humanity. The loudspeakers may fall silent. The generals may count their coins. But the story of Kiev, of courage, endurance, and human triumph, will echo across generations. It is a message for the world. Life is priceless, hope is unstoppable, and the human spirit will always rise, even in the face of the darkest greed and betrayal. Tonight, tomorrow, and forever, Kiev stands as a testament. The human heart, when brave, compassionate, and unyielding, is stronger than any enemy, any corrupt leader, and any force that seeks to reduce life to profit. And that, above all, is the victory that endures.